committee. Thank everybody for coming here on this hot day, especially those of you who traveled some distance. I'd like to begin with a moment of quiet reflection and introspection, please. Thank you. Okay, we've got a full complement here. For those of you who have not been before this committee in person in some time, we're a committee of 5 members. Mayor Tecklenburg to my left, Councilmember Parker to my next left, Councilmember Gregg, and Councilmember Brady. Others may come in and out, but those are the committee members. My name is Mike Seekings. I'm the chairman. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. That's my goal, and we generally achieve that on time. So with that, we'll get right to it. The first thing on our agenda is approval of a couple sets of minutes for May 19th and June 13th. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval, May 9th and June 13th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, additions, deletions, corrections? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The ayes have it. I see there's nothing under old business. So next, under new business, A is the Municipal State Highway Project Agreement, otherwise known as the road, otherwise known as the much talked about, somewhat misunderstood road safety audit. I'm going to let Mr. Somerville do an introduction. Then I understand we have some friends with us here from the SCDOT are going to take the podium and give us a briefing. Mr. Somerville.
Yes, sir. Yes, we have Kaylin Metz is here to give y'all some handouts and provide a little presentation on the Lower King Street or the road safety audit that was conducted by DOT.
Okay. With that, Ms. Metz, happy to have you.
Well,
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks.
if you don't mind speaking in the microphone.
Yeah, let's.
For the record.
And if you feel more comfortable, we can probably move it right wherever you want it.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not only King Street that these RSAs are encompassing, it is King, Meeting, St. Philip, and Calhoun Streets. I know King has been in the news a lot lately and has gotten some attention. So these are 4 federally funded highway safety improvement projects. The program uses a data-driven approach to identify corridors and locations with high crash rates, and then to do a engineering study, and then through that study, implement engineering solutions to remedy the high crash rate causes. So on this sheet, you can see the 4 corridors, and then you see numbers beside them. Those are the rankings on that list. So in 2018, we did that study to see where those corridors ranked. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 6. So there was a significant number of pedestrian and bicycle crashes occurring on these locations. And
What was
so
number 1?
That is a good question. I do not know. I don't have that list in front of me.
I'm glad we aren't on it.
That's right. Hardin Street in Columbia.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So we performed the RSAs back in 2018, and through that, we came up with engineering solutions proposed. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the actual improvements. It's going to be leading pedestrian intervals. That gets the pedestrian in front of the turning vehicles when they're making a left, kind of gets them out in the crosswalk. It's going to be thermoplastic improvements. So we're going to add ladder style crosswalks to all the intersections and the side streets. Then there's pedestrians, all PID scramble phases. I believe Robbie had a different name for them than we were using. But we're proposing those in some of the intersections along the corridors. And then there's a bicycle boulevard proposed and 2-way bicycle track on St. Philip, and then a road diet on Lower King. Moving on, so there's a timeline in this packet. That's some of the improvements as well. The crash data is in there. And then the more hot topic for Lower King, you have 3 packets that show the current layout of King Street, what was proposed in the RSA, and then what we redesigned to address the city's concerns with the Lower King section from Line Street or from Calhoun Street down to Broad Street.
Huh.
What questions do you have?
I'm sure we do have some questions. I'm going to go around and ask the committee members. Are there any questions? I've got a couple before we get going, just procedurally. So we're all on the same page where we are today, which is, what's today's date? July 18th, 2023. What's the next step? Is my understanding the next step is for us as a committee to either recommend or not to the city council to vote to give the mayor the authority to enter into an MOU with the SCDOT to take the next steps forward to be able for you all to implement this project. Am I correct about that?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the fact that there has been some amendments, some adjustments to make this project safer since the original publication, will that allow for some input once this, I mean, this is the first time we've seen this all as a packet as a committee today, for some input along the way from both this committee, city council, and the public.
So we have a policy as far as what needs to be re-seen for public involvement. Currently, we're still providing bicycle access for Lower King. And so the design hasn't changed to where we need to go back to the public at this time.
Okay, so what's the timing on all this, please?
It really just depends on when this municipal agreement is signed. Once we have that, then we can begin moving forward with final plans and go from there.
And any idea sort of what that looks like in time, in terms of timing?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Any questions from any member of the committee? Yes, sir. Councilmember Brady.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Seekings. So I just had a quick question. Just looking at the packet, we have the project, just kind of budget. But I'm wondering in looking at sorry, there's a lot of handouts here. From the original RSA proposed layout, which included the bike lane that was one directional on King Street to the redesign that does not include one, does that impact any funding that was originally proposed for the project?
No, sir.
Okay. And then, so is it my understanding the St. Philip Street design that would include a bidirectional bike lane, and then the city, I think, would pick up the cost? Is that right, Mr. Chairman?
I think part of it is.
Okay.
So our project is going to encompass, St. Philip as a whole goes from Line down to George. From Calhoun to George is that two-way cycle track. We're ending at George, and then the city is going to pick up and do their own project from George to Bufane.
Okay. And then the only other thing that I had, just since we had this in front of us today, and I know it doesn't necessarily warrant a public hearing, given that the city, aside from the St. Philip Street part, is not necessarily expending funding. But I wonder if full city council would have access to this information as well, and or do this as part of council communications.
Well, we're going to report this out to full council tonight. Is there something in addition you think needs to be done to bring to full council?
I'm just with the, I think your famous quote was the 3,952 emails that we've gotten before. And also I feel like on this recently, I just wonder if it wouldn't be more prudent to have a similar style presentation for full council who's also getting this influx of emails. And I know we're going to report out on it, but it may just be good to have some time to digest it as well.
Well, I believe that our friends from the DOT have volunteered to stay tonight and present to city council. If we think that that's necessary, it might be that, and we've got 5 voting members here. If we do that, maybe we can move this up a little bit in the agenda so they don't have to sit all night. So if that's a request from this committee, we'll certainly, I think they're here. I don't think they're objecting. So I think it's probably a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Unless there's any objection to that. Mayor Tecklenburg.
So if we do proceed with the presentation fully, I remember the prior presentations that were a little more complete about the rest of the project, including St. Philip Street Upper King Street, Upper Meeting Street. Do you have in your inventory kind of those prior slides on kind of the whole project? Because
We brought some plans that we can share, but we don't have anything actually to show for those. It's just that list of improvements on there is pretty much corridor wide for all 4 corridors other than St. Philip.
okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
I know we've come to focus on this Lower King Street portion, but I think it's important to keep in mind the overall safety improvements that are going to be accomplished here, which I believe are quite remarkable and helpful to our city. And I'm very thankful to our partnership in moving this along. And speaking of safety, I'm ready to move this forward because time, I feel like time is of the essence. I do want to address the bike lane on Lower King Street because we went back as part of a subsequent meeting about this matter and asked Mr. Somerville, even me, sorry, Robbie, to look back at our people pedal plan that had been approved years ago about the main thoroughfares that would be in essence designated as kind of the primary bike venues, if you will. It looks like Councilmember Seekings has a copy of it right here. May I look at that? So it kind of shows, if I'm not mistaken, that St. Philip Street is a designated for a bike boulevard, and that's what we'd like to do is go by that plan. And I think explain to everyone who might not know what the track is, the bike track, versus what had previously been recommended for King Street.
You mean on Lower King or
On St. Philip Street versus King Street?
Yeah, so St. Philip, and this was originally proposed in the RSA from Line Street to Calhoun is going to be a bicycle boulevard, which means that there's going to be bike sharrows on the pavement and it's going to be an open access for bicycles and cars to use together. From Calhoun to George Street is that 2-way cycle track, which is that dedicated bike facility, 2-lane bike facility, as well as a dedicated road lane for vehicular traffic.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
And per our discussions, you're taking it to George Street, and I hereby ask my colleagues on council to support, and I know we have some reserve funding that can handle this, for the city to take the responsibility and the cost to take that cycle track, as you call it, 2-way cycle from George Street down to Bufane Street, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So honestly, I know it may seem like a bit of a compromise to those who had wanted a single lane on King Street, but I do think it's a good compromise. It's one whereby St. Philip Street gets that designation. I think in the long run, it's safer. And I think having it 2-way is a real benefit, is something that we'd all like to see. So I just thought I would share that with everyone. And thank you.
Yes, sir. And just to clarify too, the lower section of King from Calhoun to Broad is going to have sharrows on it as well. So kind of like that bicycle boulevard, except King's going to be a 1-way street.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for our knowledge, what changed from the original proposal to the redesign?
So
obviously, I would assume maybe some safety issues or safety concerns, but I think it's important for maybe everyone to hear that.
Absolutely. So in that packet, there's those 2 different cross sections. The originally proposed plans for the RSA on that lower section of King had a dedicated bike lane on that lower section from Calhoun to Broad. With the redesign to meet kind of some of the city's concerns and city's needs, we did a 14-foot lane from Lower King. And then adding those bike sharrows on there. So it's a mixed media for bicyclists and vehicles to travel that section of the corridor.
Okay, but again, what I'm looking at, so the original proposal had the bike lane, obviously, the new redesign doesn't have it. There's a reason we took that away, correct?
Yes, ma'am. There was some concerns about congestion as far as delivery vehicles in that bike lane and that configuration, the lane configuration to work by the city. And so we adjusted that and we added to, and this was with the original proposal as well, but there are more loading zones for delivery vehicles to pull off to help alleviate that congestion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from any other member of the committee? Councilmember Gregg, you've been quiet.
I'm going to ask one very clear question. So the only way that we can get 2-lane bike traffic up and down this corridor is to put that on St. Philip Street. There's
That's
no
correct.
possible way to do that on King Street. I just want that very clearly stated for the record.
For a 2-way, no, it would not
Okay.
work. I mean, if you want to keep the parking. Now, if the city is willing to give up parking along one side of that street
There
in
is
total, then there's,
no appetite on our behalf to give up that parking. But thank you.
yes, sir.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to add, Councilmember Parker, there was one other difference, and that is in consideration of pedestrian traffic that we have, which is pretty intense sometimes on Lower King Street, and the sidewalks aren't that wide. There's like a little safety buffer of a foot on either side of the street, on both sides, between the curb and the parking, and between the curb and the travel lane, to where there's just a little safety factor, if you will, when the sidewalk gets so crowded. And I'm going to go ahead and put it out there, and this may be a project down the road, but it kind of sets up the thought that maybe we widen the sidewalks on King Street one day and make it even safer for pedestrians, given all the pedestrian traffic that we have there. Thanks.
Any other questions in the committee? Yes, sir. Councilmember Gregg.
One more question. So
Sure.
this will end at Buchanan Street. So if you were on a bike and you wanted to get down to Broad Street, is the thought that you'd use Archdale? Bicycle traffic would use Archdale to go back and forth once you got to Buchanan?
That's the idea.
I mean, so for our current, not from the city taking over, the bicyclists would just go back to existing road rules.
Okay, all right. And that's a smaller neighborhood street, so, okay. But not a dedicated bike.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? A couple things I'd just like to add on top. First, Mayor Tecklenburg's observation, this is so much more than just that King Street corridor. There's a lot of safety improvements that seem intuitive. I've called them micro projects. They're only small in scale, but they're not small in importance, right? I mean, making crosswalks more visible and safer and redoing signalization, all those things are really going to bring attention to the fact that we share all this space. We had, I thought you'd find this interesting, Mr. Mayor and fellow members of this committee. We had a launch this week for an initiative that is led by our police department called Heads Up. I renamed it Heads Up Y'all. I don't think they like that very much, but I did. And the whole idea is we have just had an inordinate number of interdictions in this community, and particularly on the peninsula, between vehicles and pedestrians. And it's amazing sort of some of the things that can happen along the way if you just make it very obvious that there are pedestrians out there, and all pedestrians are vulnerable. And one of the speakers at the press conference was a trauma surgeon from MUSC, and she brought up the fact that of the interdictions that they see and the major trauma that they see between vehicle and pedestrian, the large number of those people are visitors to the city, our guests and our tourists, because they're not as familiar with what's going on around here and they don't sort of know the rhythms of the road. And that's a clear indication to me that we've got work to do. And she applauded very much the fact that we're doing things like this road safety audit and some other things and paying attention. So that's one. Two, to answer Councilmember Parker's question and sort of a little bit more in full, because this is my district and this is something that I've been very interested in for a long time across the board, which is multimodalism, bike pedestrian safety, all those things. When the plan first came out from the DOT, there were some concerns raised by people in the area. I mean, there's no question about that. The business community raised some concerns, the College of Charleston raised some concerns, the residents raised some concerns, and we thought there's probably a better way to do this that had nothing to do with taking anything away. We've got lots of emails about, why are you taking stuff away from this, that, and the other thing? We're not. We're trying to make the area safer. This is going to make the King Street corridor safer for everybody, for pedestrians and for bicyclists. Just because we're not putting a dedicated bike lane doesn't mean we're not interested in safety. We are. If you go down King Street, one of the things I like to do is, you know, no secret, I like to run. I do a lot of running, and there's a few days a year, particularly on Thanksgiving morning, where we get to run without cars on King Street. It's wonderful. And you get to run the wrong way during the Turkey Day run. And whenever I run that run, I try to run right in the dead center of King Street. Why do I do that when there's no cars out there? Why?
It's aggressive.
Correct. It is convex like crazy. And the only really flat, safe place, even for a pedestrian or runner, is that middle. If we had a bike lane going one way south on that east side, you would be on the side literally of a mini hill. It's not safe. It's not safe. This was not planned. It wasn't the safest it could be. What we're doing here is better. I always say the enemy of good is better. It wasn't good. This is better. And it's going to provide two-way cycle track on St. Philip Street. It's going to calm traffic on King Street. It is 100% consistent with the People Vital Plan. 100%. I mean, if you look at King Street, it calls for traffic calming. We're doing that. Traffic calming comes in a lot of different forms, by the way. Putting one lane down King Street is going to make it so much better. I mean, it's crazy if you go down there now, things weaving in and out. You got buses, delivery vehicles, pedestrians, skateboarders, cars, all that. It's going to bring some order and calm there. And then having a cycle track through the College of Charleston campus with access north-south makes perfect sense. And it takes care of a lot of other challenges that we may have in the future. So I applaud the DOT for being here and for listening to the community, which was pretty loud about this, that we can do better. And it's the first time in my career as a member of city council that we've really gotten together and done this cooperatively. And it's going to be better. And I hope that people, when they look at this, look at the whole thing, look at it holistically and say, yeah, that makes sense from a safety perspective. And that's in the end what this is all about. Heads up. And heads up come in a lot of forms. Heads up, look at this, look at our People Pedal Plan, look at what's going to get implemented. More to come from the city side in terms of drawing this plan out to make sure people have some input. We here at City Council are still going to be here. The DOT is going to do its work. We're going to keep listening and make sure it gets implemented the right way in conjunction with our partners, the business community on King Street, the College of Charleston, the citizens who live downtown, all of whom think this is a better plan. And I agree with that. I agree with that. So I'm hoping that this committee will pass this along to City Council for its consideration. Thank you for volunteering at Councilmember Brady's request. I think is a good one to answer some questions from the rest of the council, because this does affect other districts, not just District 8, not just District 1, if Councilmember Gregg is, but it goes north of Calhoun Street into the neighborhoods and will be a great benefit to them too. So are there any other questions for anybody on this? I think the action that would be required from this committee is a recommendation on the council to then recommend that the mayor be allowed to sign an MOU with the DOT for further drawing and implementation of this plan. So is there a motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And we'll try to get you up on the agenda at City Council if that suits y'all. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Next. Black Lotus Limo, Certificate of Public Convenience, Mr. Somerville.
I'll take that.
Oh,
Chair.
Mr. Mathis, I'm sorry.
So we have a limo application from Black Lotus Limo. Our legal department has reviewed it and we have reviewed it as well, and we recommend approval.
Move for approval.
Any discussion? Is this the same form we've always used for an application? Or is this a new one?
I think so. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any discussion? No, yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman. How many of these, are these similar to, how many of these do we allow I know it might be a little different than the pedicabs, but is there a number that we limit?
No.
Okay.
There's no limit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Y'all keep up with me here. Next.
I would move to take C and D together since they're both traffic calming requests.
Is there a second? All right, before we take them together, anything we need to know on C or D, Mr. Somerville or Mr. Mathis or anybody else?
So they were both reviewed by fire and they met all the petition requirements. So we recommend approval.
Usual question, where are we in the budget?
With all of our obligated traffic calming at this point, we're somewhere under $100,000.
Somewhere under $100,000 into the budget or that's?
We have a little under 100,000 remaining for the rest of
Oh,
the year.
remaining.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so we out of 125 or 150?
149.
Okay, so we're still doing okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, bring on your applications. Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, what was the time process from start to finish on this? I'm just curious since we changed some things. Just curious.
These took a little while because we needed the fire's approval on these, but that is working a lot better.
Okay,
They took, I think anywhere between 4 and 6 months to get
Okay.
through that.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right.
Move to adjourn.
I think we've come to the end of our agenda. We've got a motion to adjourn. So if there's nothing for the greater good, this meeting is hereby adjourned. See you all at 4:30. Wow, thank you. Doing good.